So in this video, we're going to be looking at using the quadratic formula in order to solve a quadratic equation. Now, this is a quadratic equation because it's got an x squared term, and we've used factorization or factorizing in the past to solve it. Now, when a quadratic cannot be factorized, we can use something called the quadratic formula. Now, it looks really scary, but it's not actually that bad. I'll step you through it. So we're going to use this quadratic formula to solve the values of x that make this equation true. Now we can't factorize it because two numbers that multiply to give you -2, well, it has to be 1 and 2. And if you add together, if it's 1 take 2, that'll give you -1. If it's 2 take 1, that'll give you positive x. So there's no way to factorize this quadratic, but if you actually were to graph this quadratic, it actually has x-intercepts. So there are values of x that make this equation true. Now they're actually decimal numbers. So I'm going to show you how to use the quadratic formula in order to solve this. Now, you'll notice up here, any quadratic, okay? So the coefficient, or the number out the front of the x squared term, is equal to the a value. So if there's no number, it's not a 0, it's a 1. So our a value is 1. Now b is the value at the front of the x term, or the coefficient, or the number. Now, at the front of the x term, there's a 2, but there's actually a -2. Don't be careful to include the negative. So our b value is -2. And then finally, our c is just our number by itself. And again, it's -2. So our c value is -2. So we're going to substitute into our quadratic formula. So our formula is x equals minus b. So there's always a minus there. So we're going to write minus, and then we're going to replace b with our value of b, which is -2. And then we're going to do plus and minus, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. And then b squared, well, it's -2 squared. Take 4 lots of a, which is 1, times by our c, which is -2. And that's all going to be divided, the entire line, as we can see up here. That's going to be divided by 2 lots of a, which is 1. So we're going to need to do some simplifying. So taking a negative is the same as plussing, so that's just 2. Plus or minus. Now, -2 squared, -2 times -2 is 4. So it's going to be 4. And now we're going to simplify this. -4 times 1 is -4. -4 times -2 is +8. And then we're going to divide the whole line by 2 lots of 1. And 2 lots of 1 is 2. So we're going to have 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus 8. And guess what? We can simplify that slightly more. And we'll get 2 plus or 2, not z. 2 plus or minus the square root of, what's 4 plus 8? 12. So 2 plus or minus the square root of 12 divided by 2. So our two solutions are 2 plus square root 12 and then divide by 2, or 2 subtract square root of 12 divided by 2. So I want you to practice typing this into your calculator. So I'm just going to do it into my calculator. I'm going to do 2 plus square root of 12, and I get 5.46, and then I'm going to divide it by 2, and I get 2.73. So my values of x, and I'm just going to write it up here because I'm running out of room. My values of x are 2.73, or if I do this one here, now I'm going to do 2 subtract the square root of 12, and I get -1.46, and then I'm going to divide by 2, and I get -0.73. So my values of x are either 2.73 or -0.73. Now if I chuck in my quadratic into Desmos, with y equals x squared take 2x take 2, I get the following. And look, it does, even though we couldn't factorize it, it still has values of x, or x-intercepts. So these values of x make this equation true. So 2.73 squared, take 2 lots of 2.73, take 2 is going to give me 0. Likewise with this solution. So these are my two solutions, 2.73 and minus 0.73. I'm just going to step you through the quadratic formula one more time. So the values are A is 2. My B value is 3. My C value is negative 4. So I'm going to substitute into my quadratic formula, and I'm going to get x equals minus b, so minus 3, plus or minus, and my pen's having a fit, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 3 squared, take 4 lots of a, which is 2, times by c, which is negative 4. And I'm going to divide all of that by 2 lots of a, which is 2 lots of 2. So I'm going to write minus 3 plus or minus. Now 3 squared is 9. Minus 4 times 2 is minus 8. Minus 8 times minus 4 is positive 32. And that's going to be all divided by 2 times 2, which is 4. Next, I'm going to simplify even further. So it's going to be plus or minus 9 plus 32 is 41. And that's all going to be divided by 4. So my two solutions are either minus 3 plus square root 41 divided by 4. Oh, I can't write down here. That's so painful. Divide by 4. Or it's going to be minus 3 subtract square root 41 divided by 4. And if I type these into my calculator, let's just do it. So minus 3 plus square root 41, that's 3.4, divided by 4 will give me it'll give me 0.85. So x is equal to 0.85, or, and then if I do minus 3 subtract square root 41, and that gives me minus 9.4, and if I divide that by 4, I'm going to get minus 2.35. So x is equal to 0.85 or minus 2.35. So those values of x make this equation true. And if we plug it into Desmos, so if we type in y equals 2x squared plus 3x take 4, we get this quadratic. And if we look carefully and we click on the x-intercepts, we get the 0.85 and we get the minus 2.35. So that's how we can use the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation. And the solutions to our quadratic equation are going to be equal to the x-intercepts, because an x-intercept occurs when y is equal to 0. So I want you guys to have a go at these practice problems on this slide. Pause the video and have a go at these and practice them yourselves. So solve the following quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. Use Desmos to check your answers. The x-intercepts of the quadratic are going to be the solutions to these below equations. Just when you're typing into Desmos, don't forget to write y equals x squared plus x take 1. Cheers.